Dr. Ayanna Brooks moved through the hospital corridors with the confidence earned through years of sleepless nights, impossible cases, and personal sacrifices. Her white coat flowed behind her like a cape, but in this place, it never quite made her invisible to the gazes that lingered too long or the silence that followed when she entered a room full of colleagues. At 35, Ayanna was one of the youngest attending physicians in the internal medicine department at St. Matthew's Medical Center in Los Angeles. Her credentials were flawless. Ivy League education, top of her class in med school, years of residency with praise from senior doctors. But none of that seemed to matter the way it should have. Every morning, she parked in the far corner of the lot, despite having a reserved space closer to the building. After too many anonymous notes and a scratched bumper, she'd stopped asking questions. She walked into the staff lounge to grab a coffee. Her presence met with the same pattern. Conversations pausing for a breath too long, eyes darting, smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes. "Morning," she offered to the group of nurses by the counter. One of them, Jenna, replied politely, but others turned away, busying themselves with cups and phones. Ayanna wasn't new to this. She grew up in Compton, the daughter of a school teacher and a mechanic. She knew how to read between the lines, how to keep her voice even, how to carry the burden without showing the strain. Today's rounds were in the oncology unit. As she entered the patient's room, the family glanced at her name tag, then at her face. "You're the doctor?" the elderly man in the bed asked, squinting. "Not the nurse?" She smiled calmly. "Yes, sir, I'm Dr. Brooks. I'll be reviewing your test results and discussing the treatment plan." There was a pause. His wife looked skeptical. His daughter, who hadn't looked up from her phone until now, finally made eye contact. "Oh, okay," she said. "That's good." Ayanna didn't flinch. She'd had worse. The passive-aggressive kind of skepticism. The whispered request for a second opinion, not because of the medical advice, but because of who gave it. Later that afternoon, during a departmental meeting, Dr. Stein interrupted her presentation 3 times. Not to ask questions, but to rephrase her data as if it were his own. The room nodded at his words, seemingly unaware that she'd said the same thing a moment earlier. Afterward, Dr. Patel leaned in. "Good work in there," he whispered. "Don't mind Stein, he's just old school." Old school. It was the code word for everything she wasn't supposed to challenge. At 8:30 p.m., Ayanna finally peeled off her gloves after assisting in a complicated abdominal surgery. As she washed her hands, she noticed her reflection in the mirror. Not tired, that wasn't new, but weary. That's what this place did. Not just the hours, not just the emotional weight of life and death. It was the 1,000 small slights, the unchecked bias, the invisible wall between her and the full acceptance she deserved. She dried her hands and reached for her phone. One message from her mother. "Proud of you. Don't let them steal your joy." Ayanna smiled, the message briefly warming her chest like sunlight through hospital blinds. Then a nurse poked her head in. "Patient in 6B is crashing. We need you." She moved without hesitation, because when the call came, despite everything, she answered, because this was her calling, even when it hurt. Dr. Ayanna Brooks's alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., but she was already awake. Her mind had been replaying yesterday's surgery, Stein's condescension, and the patient in room 6B who'd whispered, "Are you really the doctor?" when she approached his bedside. She dressed in silence, pulling her locks into a tight bun. Her white coat, laundered and pressed, waited on the back of her bedroom door. By the time she left her apartment in Inglewood, the sun hadn't yet risen. At St. Matthew's, the hospital already pulsed with pre-dawn urgency. Ambulances came and went. The parking lot echoed with the metallic slam of car doors and the low hum of staff rushing into the building. Ayanna made her way inside, nodding to security, a middle-aged man named Harris, who always greeted her with a respectful, "Good morning, Doc." "Morning," she replied, trying to summon warmth. In the residence lounge, a few of the junior doctors were gathered, coffee in hand, laughing softly. When Ayanna entered, the laughter paused. Someone muttered a, "Hey, Doc," while others offered tight smiles. She recognized it, the performance of politeness. Her resident for the week, Dr. Julian Park, entered a moment later, adjusting his scrubs. "Ready for another long one?" he asked. "As always," she said. They began rounds at 6:15 a.m. On paper, it was a smooth shift. Patients stabilized, medications administered, vitals consistent. But Ayanna noticed the subtle things. A nurse skipping her in updates, choosing to report directly to a white male colleague. A pharmacist questioning her dosage recommendations. A patient asking if she was one of those diversity hires. She didn't react, not in the moment. After rounds, Julian caught up with her in the stairwell. "Can I ask you something?" he said, hesitating. "Sure," she replied, warily. "How do you deal with it?" he asked. "You know, all of it." Ayanna paused on the landing. She looked at Julian. Young, Korean-American, smart, still full of belief in the system. He wasn't asking out of pity, but out of genuine confusion, maybe even concern. "Ideal," she said, "because if I don't, they win. And I didn't go through a decade of training to let them win." He nodded slowly, unsure how to respond. Later, during a staff meeting, the chief of medicine presented new data protocols. Ayanna asked a question, a clear, evidence-based concern about how it might impact patient care. Dr. Roth, a senior colleague, interrupted with a dismissive, "Let's not overcomplicate things." No one said anything, not even the other women in the room. After the meeting, she approached Dr. Patel. "I've been noticing a pattern," she said. "A lot of what I say gets either ignored or reworded by someone else. Often, someone who doesn't look like me." Dr. Patel shifted uncomfortably. "I know. I mean, I see it sometimes." "Do you ever say anything?" He opened his mouth, closed it again, then said, "It's complicated, Ayanna." She nodded, more tired than angry. That afternoon, she got called into HR. She had been reported for being intimidating during consultations. The complaint was anonymous. The HR officer, a woman named Ms. King, said, "This isn't disciplinary. Just a heads up. Maybe consider softening your tone in patient interactions." "My tone?" Ayanna asked. "It's not a criticism, just something to be mindful of. You're a woman in a high-pressure field. People notice demeanor. They notice my skin before my tone," Ayanna wanted to say. Instead, she nodded. When she returned to her floor, Julian was waiting. "Everything okay?" he asked. She forced a smile. "Just another meeting." That evening, Ayanna walked the halls alone, making her final checks. In room 214, a little black girl with sickle cell named Maya clutched her mother's hand as Ayanna approached. "Hi, sweetheart," Ayanna said. "I'm Dr. Brooks. We're going to take great care of you." The mother's eyes lit up. She's been waiting for a doctor who looks like her. Maya smiled. Ayanna's chest tightened. That moment, rare as it was, reminded her why she stayed, why she endured. Back in the stairwell, Ayanna paused. The walls were covered in old posters for diversity initiatives and hospital galas, hollow symbols. But Maya's face stayed with her. She would keep showing up every day, even if the system didn't want her there. Dr. Maya Thompson stood outside exam room 3, reviewing the patient chart on her tablet. The hallway buzzed with the quiet rhythm of footsteps and beeping machines, but a heavy stillness hovered over her. Every day felt like a quiet war, a war not marked by shouting or slurs, but by looks, by silences, by decisions made without her, and assumptions stacked against her. Inside, Mr. Lindell, a middle-aged man with chest pain, sat upright on the exam table. When Maya entered, he glanced up and visibly tensed. "Good morning, Mr. Lindell. I'm Dr. Thompson. I see you've been experiencing chest discomfort." He looked her up and down. "You're the doctor?" "Yes, sir, I am." He grunted, folding his arms. "You sure you're qualified for this?" It wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. As Maya conducted the exam with practiced professionalism, she could feel his gaze, skeptical, dismissive. When she stepped out to order labs, he murmured under his breath, "Didn't think they let just anyone in these days." She didn't respond. She had learned that silence was often her sharpest defense. At the nurse's station, she typed notes quickly, her fingers tapping in frustration. "You okay, Dr. T?" asked April, one of the few nurses who consistently treated her with respect. "Just another patient questioning my license," Maya replied dryly. April rolled her eyes. "This place is full of fossils." They both knew it wasn't just age. It was mindset. Later that day, Maya was called into a meeting with Chief Resident Dr. Green. He was young, white, and charming, the kind of man who got instant respect when he walked into a room. "I've been getting some feedback about your bedside manner," he began, steepling his fingers. Maya raised an eyebrow. "From who?" "Patients, some of the attendings. They say you're a little cold." She laughed quietly, bitterly. Cold or confident? He frowned. "I'm just passing on what I've heard. Maybe try smiling more, being a little softer." Maya's jaw tightened. She'd heard that too many times in her life. From men, from supervisors, from patients. After the meeting, she sat alone in the locker room, her scrub top damp from stress and heat. She pulled out her phone and opened a group chat with her med school friends. They'd all scattered after graduation, but the chat was still alive, barely. She typed, "Another patient today didn't believe I was a doctor. Then I got pulled into a meeting about how I'm cold. I'm tired." Moments passed before a reply popped up. "Sam, girl, same. I got told I was too assertive in rounds. Translation: I'm black and I don't bow my head. Lena, we're all tired, but they're not ready for us. That's why they try to break us." Maya smiled faintly. The thread was a lifeline. That night, Maya walked into her apartment and sank onto the couch. The quiet was a blessing. No monitors, no clipped tones. Just her and the city lights blinking through the window. She thought of her mother, how she used to say, "You'll have to be twice as good for half the recognition." Maya hadn't understood it at 13. She understood it now. She closed her eyes. Tomorrow would be the same war. But tonight, she let herself breathe. The days following the disciplinary board hearing blurred into each other. Dr. Maya Johnson still showed up on time, still wore her white coat, and still carried the weight of unspoken judgments in every corridor she walked. The final decision from the board hadn't come down yet, but the rumor mill churned relentlessly. Her colleagues no longer whispered when she passed, they just stared. Some patients requested different doctors. Even nurses who used to joke with her now gave tight, polite nods and moved on quickly. The silence around her had grown louder. Despite it all, Maya kept working. She poured herself into her rounds, doubled down on patient care, and documented everything meticulously. There was a moment, one quiet night in the ICU, when she found herself standing over a sedated patient, whispering, "I am still here." Not to the patient, but to herself. The walls hadn't collapsed. She hadn't been fired. But she knew something had broken inside the system. Something irreparable, and perhaps something that had always been cracked to begin with. One afternoon, she was called to consult on a complex case, an elderly man in respiratory failure with a dozen complications and a family too distraught to think clearly. Maya walked into the room, explained the condition clearly, calmly, and gently. She offered solutions, answered questions, and stayed past her shift to make sure the man was stabilized. Afterward, the patient's daughter took her hand. "Thank you, doctor," she said. "I didn't expect someone like you to care so much." Maya blinked. She knew what someone like you meant. She smiled anyway, but even small kindnesses couldn't erase what she endured daily. One of the younger interns, a white male, was promoted to lead a new research project, a project Maya had proposed and developed. She hadn't even been informed about the meeting where the decision was made. When she inquired, the department head offered a dismissive shrug. "We needed someone more palatable to the board," he'd said, barely veiling his intent. The message was clear. Excellence wasn't enough. Not when your skin was the wrong color. Maya began documenting everything. Every shift change, every oversight, every time she was passed over. She kept emails, texts, and records of meetings. Not because she wanted revenge, but because she needed proof for herself and others like her. She started speaking to a civil rights attorney carefully, cautiously. The attorney didn't promise her anything. "Hospitals protect their own," she said, "but we'll build a case if you're ready." Maya wasn't sure she was, but she couldn't stay silent anymore. Not if it meant this would happen to another woman like her. One night, a patient coded in the ER. Maya rushed in to lead the resuscitation. The attending that night tried to take over, one who had always undermined her authority. But the nurses looked to Maya. She had trained them. She gave orders, administered medications, and brought the patient back. It was seamless, efficient, professional. And yet afterward, the attending wrote her up for insubordination. That was the word, a word they used when you dared to lead while black. The hospital launched another review. Maya wasn't surprised. She sat through it calm, composed, her records in hand. This time, though, she spoke. "I am not here to ask for validation," she said. "I am here to hold a mirror to your faces. I have done my job, and I have done it well. The question is, have you?" The board squirmed. Some looked away. One older woman, clearly uncomfortable, said, "We'll take this under consideration." Maya knew that meant nothing, but it was the first time they heard her truth. She walked out of that meeting with her back straight, not because the outcome was certain, but because she had claimed her voice. She had spent too long carrying shame that didn't belong to her. In the hallway, a younger black nurse caught up with her. "I heard what you said in there," she whispered. "Thank you." And that was when Maya knew her fight wasn't just for herself. It was for all the ones still afraid to speak. The battle was far from over, but her silence was. The final hearing came quickly, faster than Maya had anticipated. The hospital had already made its decision. They would reprimand her for her unprofessionalism and insubordination during her last few months of service. The board was careful, deliberate. They tried to make it sound like a decision of principle, not one of race. Maya could see the words they chose: professional decorum, adherence to protocol. They had nothing to do with her abilities as a doctor. Everything to do with the color of her skin. But she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. That evening, Maya gathered the evidence she had carefully compiled. She documented every moment of injustice, every subtle, poisonous interaction. She'd already spoken with the civil rights attorney. She was ready to file a formal complaint. This wasn't just about her career anymore. It was about sending a message that couldn't be ignored. She was no longer willing to stay quiet. She wasn't going to let them destroy her spirit. The next morning, before she even received the formal letter of reprimand, she filed the paperwork. It was time to act. A few weeks later, as Maya prepared for another shift, she was called into the office of the hospital administrator. It was an intimidating room, cold, sterile. He sat behind a large desk, papers scattered around him like they were meant to overwhelm. "Dr. Johnson," he started, "we've reviewed your case. We appreciate your service to the hospital." Maya's heart skipped a beat. He paused a little too long, as if waiting for her to beg for mercy. But she didn't. She stood tall, waiting. He continued, "However, we feel your departure is the best for all parties involved." The words hit like a slap, but Maya didn't flinch. She simply nodded. She had known it was coming. "I understand," she said, her voice steady. "But just know this: I will not be your scapegoat. You cannot silence me." The administrator sighed and handed her the formal termination letter. Maya took it, folded it carefully, and stood up. "Goodbye, Dr. Johnson," he said. But as she turned to leave, he added, "We expect you to pack up and leave immediately." Maya didn't look back. She didn't need their approval. She had nothing to prove to them. Outside, the world felt different. Not lighter, but freer. She had fought, and she had won in a way. Her story was out there now. She'd made it clear that discrimination would not be tolerated, not even under the white coats that so many wore like armor. Her fight wasn't over, but it was no longer just her fight. It was a fight for every doctor, every nurse, every healthcare worker who had ever been silenced, overlooked, or dismissed. She knew what her next steps would be. The case was just beginning, and she would be there to see it through to the end. Maya knew the path ahead would be long, and she knew it would not be easy. But there was a peace in her heart. She had finally found her voice, and no one would take it away from her. She thought of all the others who would come after her. Young women of color, young black doctors with dreams of breaking down barriers. They would have her to thank. And if she could inspire even one of them to speak up, to stand tall, then her fight would have been worth it. Maya left the hospital for the last time, knowing she was walking towards something better, something that couldn't be taken away.